Conor McGregor's comeback lasted 69 seconds. One kick, one landing, and then his night was over. Moments later, he posted a message that stopped the sport in its tracks, describing what he just experienced in the darkest terms he could find. Fighters, rivals, and fans were still trying to process what they just watched when his own words landed on their timelines. The fight ended almost before it began, and what came after it may end up being the part everyone remembers. The T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas was packed for UFC 329. And the noise when Conor McGregor walked out was the kind of noise that only follows the sport's biggest star. 5 years, that's how long fans had waited for this. After 5 years away, the fight week feels of having McGregor headlining a card had arrived. Across from him stood Max Holloway, the man McGregor had already beaten once 13 years earlier, back when both of them were just getting started. Then the horn sounded and it was over almost as fast as it started. McGregor fell to the canvas after throwing a kick to begin the fight. He attempted to continue fighting, but the referee stepped in and ended the fight, giving Holloway a TKO win. 69 seconds. That's the number that's going to follow this fight forever. McGregor's much-anticipated UFC return lasted just 69 seconds as he injured his right leg during his fight with Max Holloway and was forced to retire. Watch it back. And here's what actually happened. In the opening seconds of the rematch, McGregor charged at Holloway and attempted a jumping kick before landing awkwardly on his right leg. The 37-year-old attempted to get up and continue, but was ultimately unable to do so as the referee called the fight off. No punch landed, no takedown, no exchange, just one leg planted wrong, and a career-defining moment collapsing into itself in real time. Holloway didn't even seem to want the win this way. Right there in the cage in front of a crowd that had started booing, he grabbed the microphone and tried to give McGregor his moment anyway. He told the arena to give it up for Conor, calling him an absolute animal, and revealed something that changes how you see those final seconds. When they were in there, he said he was trying to call the fight off, but McGregor kept asking to fight on. Then Holloway looked ahead, already selling the next chapter, telling the crowd they were lucky because there was going to be a Holloway versus McGregor trilogy fight. Now that's Holloway's side of it. Gracious, but also already moving on. McGregor's side of it came hours later and it hit very differently. He'd left the arena without talking to reporters. McGregor swiftly left the arena with a noticeable limp and without speaking to the media. Then deep into the night, he broke his silence. Not through a press conference, but through a post on X that read like it had been written straight from the gut. He opened by describing the physical damage in blunt, almost mechanical terms. His head gasket gone, destroyed. He wanted people to know this wasn't some hidden injury he'd been carrying in. He had no injury or injuries going into the fight. He was throwing kicks, planted, and jumping all throughout camp as well as backstage before the fight. This came out of nowhere. And then came the 4 words that turned an injury story into a headline. I am beyond dark here. I can only describe it as hell. Read that again. This is a man who has been booed, sued, knocked out, and broken on the biggest stages the sport has ever built. And he's telling the world that this, specifically this, is the darkest place he's been. Not the losses, not the broken leg. This. The stakes here aren't abstract. This wasn't a tune-up fight or a low-key comeback. McGregor had spent over 5 years away from the octagon, recovering from a broken leg and fighting off lawsuits after a rapid ascent to becoming an undeniable draw and a massive star. Everything about the build-up to this fight had been about proving something to the sport, to Holloway, and mostly to himself. The biggest star in company history had made it clear that he was returning to action in order to prove to himself whether he still had what it took to compete at the highest level. Instead, the questions multiplied. Right there in the cage following his injury, McGregor was unable to stay on his feet, slipping straight to the canvas on multiple occasions. To his credit, he kept trying to fight. Unfortunately, the extent of the damage he had sustained was too great, and the referee swiftly called the fight off, awarding Holloway a TKO victory. There's a detail that makes this sting worse. McGregor famously suffered a blown-out knee 13 years ago in his first UFC meeting against Max Holloway. Different leg, different night, same opponent, same brutal outcome. More than a decade later, history repeated itself in the most anticlimactic way possible at UFC 329. Even before the final medical word came in, the early read on the damage wasn't good. Dana White stood in front of reporters and gave the sport's collective diagnosis in one blunt line. "I mean, I was expecting at least a one-round war," White told reporters after the fight. "You know, who knew what Conor was capable of as far as cardio or whatever else after a 5-year layoff? Well, there you go. We're assuming blown ACL. I'm no doctor, but that's what I figured when I saw it. And the doctors think the same thing, too. That's the moment. That's the fight. 69 seconds, one leg giving out, and a statement afterward dark enough that it became the headline instead of the result. Everything else about this story, the history behind it, the reactions pouring in, what happens next, all of it builds out from those two things, the injury and the words McGregor chose to describe it. Within minutes of the stoppage, before McGregor had even posted a word, the reactions started pouring in from every corner of combat sports. This wasn't a quiet story. The unexpected ending to the headliner prompted reactions from stars across combat sports and former NFL players. Kenny Florian, a former UFC title challenger turned analyst, put words to what everyone watching live had just seen unfold in real time. He described the opening kick, the leg giving out on impact, and then just flatly called it what it was, fight over, before adding that MMA remains the most unforgiving sport in the world. Straight to the point, no cushioning. 2. Rafael dos Anjos, a former lightweight champion himself and someone who shared a cage with the biggest names in the sport, took a gentler tone but landed just as hard. He said, jokes aside, he felt for Conor and that this wasn't the way the fight should have ended. Then there was Corey Anderson, blunt as ever, asking out loud who was angrier right now, Dana White or McGregor's own fan base, practically summing up the confusion and frustration rippling through the arena and the internet in real time. Kevin Lee couldn't quite believe the physics of it, asking how a guy jumps 2 seconds into a fight and blows his knee, pointing out that game speed hits different than anything you rehearse in the gym. Derek Brunson kept his reaction to 3 words that needed no elaboration, a flat disbelief that echoed what most of the arena was feeling. Jamal Hill called it unfortunate and disappointing. No more, no less. And then there was Matt Brown, who didn't hide behind sympathy at all. He'd said it before and he said it again that McGregor would never fight in the UFC again. And this was the proof as far as he was concerned. That's 6 names, 6 different tones from disbelief to blunt prediction. And that's before you even get to the reaction that mattered most for McGregor's immediate future. Dana White. White had been in the building. He'd watched the walkout, the dry ice, the entrance that told you this was still the UFC's biggest attraction even 5 years removed from the cage. And then he watched it end in less time than it takes to read this sentence out loud twice over. His first comments after the fight tried to be measured, almost clinical, framing it as the cost of time away from the sport rather than bad luck. 5 years off in this sport is rough. White said, "We're assuming blown ACL." He repeated variations of that sentiment more than once that night, clearly trying to manage a message before the medical details were locked down. In another version of his comments to press, he laid it out plainly, almost like he was talking himself into accepting it. He said, "Ask anyone in the fight business. 5 years off in this sport is rough." But it wasn't just sympathy from White. There was also a layer of genuine surprise in how he talked about it. Like even the man who runs the promotion hadn't fully processed what he just watched. He admitted he didn't know what to expect from McGregor physically after the layoff. And when pressed on the diagnosis, he didn't dress it up. "I mean, I was expecting at least a one-round war," UFC CEO Dana White said in his post-fight news conference. Who knew what Conor was capable of as far as cardio, whatever else after a 5-year layoff, and there you go. We're assuming a blown ACL. I'm no doctor, but that's what I figured when I saw it. And doctors think the same thing, too. Away from the podium, the physical reality of the moment was already visible to anyone near the exit tunnel. McGregor didn't take the easy way out of that arena. Despite the painful setback, McGregor refused to use crutches as he exited the T-Mobile Arena, instead limping out with assistance from his team before heading for further medical evaluation. Whatever pride was left after that ending, he wasn't going to be photographed needing crutches to leave the building. He walked, however badly, on his own terms. And then came the post, the one that turned a bad night into a story with a very different center of gravity. Before McGregor's statement went up, this was a story about an injury, a blown ACL, a 5-year layoff that didn't pay off. The moment his words hit social media, it became something raw. Conor McGregor had spoken out for the first time since his UFC 329 comeback ended in disaster. Fans and fellow fighters weren't just reacting to a stoppage anymore. They were reacting to a man publicly naming the lowest point of his professional life in real time, hours after it happened with no filter and no PR polish between him and the timeline. That combination, the brutal simplicity of the injury and the brutal honesty of the statement, is what pushed this beyond a normal fight night story and into something people were still talking about the next morning. It's worth sitting with how unusual that is. Fighters get hurt, fighters lose. It happens most weekends somewhere on a UFC card. What doesn't happen often is one of the most guarded, most controlled public personalities in sports dropping every bit of that control in a single paragraph, admitting he's in a place beyond his usual descriptors, beyond trash talk, beyond bravado, beyond the version of himself the cameras usually catch. That's why the reactions kept coming in waves. First, the shock at the finish, then the sympathy mixed with a fair amount of blunt prediction about his future. Then once his statement dropped, an entirely new wave. This time responding not to what happened to him, but to what he said about what happened to him.